Hello, everyone, and welcome to another segment of Lore You Should Know. I am Greg Tito, and I am joined by Mr. Chris Perkins.
Hi there.
Who's giggling at me in the background.
Just misbehaving a little.
That is okay in my book, because today we are going to talk about a little bit of Dungeons & Dragons lore, like we do on this segment, that is aiming to misbehave.
The domains very seasonal.
Yes, exactly. It is fall here in Seattle. In fact, today it was probably the foggiest morning it's been in a long time.
It was quite spooky.
I thought I was in Barovia. I could not see 30 feet in front of me.
Yep. My dog was deeply suspicious of it.
As he should be. There was probably specters and vampires abound.
That's right. You don't want to go wandering off into some far-flung Shadowfell plain and never be seen in the mortal world again.
And that's exactly what we're talking about
today
on Lore You Should Know. The domain of dread, that is Barovia, is just one domain
of a
dread.
plethora.
There are many out there.
Exactly. What is a domain of dread, though?
That's what I'd like to know.
So they came into being during 2nd edition with the Ravenloft campaign setting. When it was decided that there was going to be a Ravenloft campaign setting, the decision was made to expand beyond Barovia and say, well, if there is a dark domain ruled by a sort of archetypal vampire, then maybe, just maybe, there are other domains like Barovia that are ruled by other archetypal monsters.
And do they fit into the D&D cosmology of the multiverse?
In a fashion, they're part of the multiverse, of course, but they are detached. They're sequestered, cut off from the rest of the multiverse by the mists. And the mists are a commonality among all of the domains. All of the domains are essentially hemmed in or bound by the mists of Ravenloft.
Interesting.
And those mists and the domains within them are sort of brought into being or put where they are by entities, very vague concept, but called the dark powers. These dark powers have been deliberately not described in detail so that there is sort of an ambiguity to them and what they can do. But in essence, what we have said over the years is the dark powers reward/punish very, very evil individuals by basically carving out their domains and separating them from the rest of the multiverse and kind of treating these domains as places they rule, but simultaneously are also their prisons.
And like playgrounds to a certain extent? Are they doing it to tease out?
Torment is probably a better word.
Yeah.
The dark powers are evil, malignant entities, and what they want to do is torment the creatures that they lock away.
Right.
Starting with the Dark Lords of the domains. So Strahd rules Barovia as your archetypal vampire. As the Ravenloft setting went on year after year, new domains were introduced and sort of captured or embodied certain corners of the horror genre. For instance, there's a domain of dread inspired by the Egyptian mummy.
I see.
And the old Universal mummy films.
Right.
And that domain came to be known as Harakir, and its mummy lord, Ankhtipat, is basically locked away in a pyramid in this domain that it presides over.
Using a lot of those Egyptian kind of motifs.
Exactly. All the Egyptian motifs are basically wrapped up in this one domain. And as you go through and you look at all the other domains, you realize that the creators, the designers of these domains were basically carving out the different archetypes. So there is a domain ruled by a wolf-were, essentially a bardic werewolf. That domain is called Kartakas, and the werewolf is known as the Meister Singer. Yeah, exactly. There's an island realm ruled by a werebat pirate. There's a realm that ruled by an evil sentient sword. There's one basically that's the domain is ruled by a house, an evil malignant house called the House of Lament.
Interesting.
Yeah, so pretty much any movie that you can think of, be it Frankenstein, Dracula, the Wolfman, whatever, there's probably a Ravenloft domain equivalent or homage to it.
And was that the intent of the designers, was to here are these tropes of horror
Yeah.
in American culture and worldwide culture to a certain extent.
Yes.
And here's how you can play within those things if you're a fan of Dungeons and Dragons.
Exactly.
And fantasy
Because I
role-playing.
think the experience that most people have with Ravenloft is they don't run an entire campaign based in Ravenloft. What they usually do is like a one-night stand or a short campaign in a specific domain, and then they're done.
Yeah.
It's sort of a one and done. So each domain is kind of its own standalone milieu environment. And the goal is almost always the same, which is get out.
If you can.
Find a way to get out. And sometimes that means defeating the Dark Lord. Sometimes it means finding some key or way or passage that the Dark Lord has been guarding. And the domains run the gamut in terms of their complexity. Some of them are quite big, and others are very, very small and local. And so you can have sort of one-night Ravenloft experiences.
Oh, okay.
A couple examples from second edition that are actually pretty easy to adapt to other editions, should you be of a mind to do so, are the old adventures Night of the Walking Dead, which is zombies. It's basically the archetypal zombie adventure.
Okay.
It's set in a small little swamp domain called Saranya. And basically, you're just fighting zombies and trying to find out where the zombie lord lives and take him out.
And there is a zombie lord who
There's
is
a
spawning
zombie lord,
these
yeah,
that's
exactly.
making them
Yeah.
all come towards
and of
you.
course, it lives in a sort of a giant graveyard necropolis, and
Oh.
so that's where you have to go for your final showdown. But then there's another adventure called The Created, where you wake up as puppets in a toy store and have to escape. And I've run versions of that as kind of one-off events myself for people who come to the office just to visit and whatnot.
You do love a puppet show.
I do love a good puppet show, and nothing says screw you like waking up as a wooden puppet marionette.
Right. The strings are on you. What
Exactly.
Are you gonna do?
So you're dealing with the mad toy maker motif and dealing with that kind of gothic horror.
With a lot of, that you use that trope a lot in Dice Camera Action, for example, but then also in Curse of Strahd.
Yep. And the best of Ravenloft, I find, are these sort of short, iconic horror experiences.
Yeah.
And I think by the time somebody gets to the end of exploring one of these domains, they're pretty much done with gothic horror and want to move on to something else.
Now, is there something that a industrious dungeon master now could take some elements of more modern horror and adapt it into a new domain of dread?
Yeah, you could essentially, because the boundaries of the domain are flexible, entirely up to you. You can make it as big or small as you want. You just have to figure out what creature you want to take and do an adaptation of.
Yeah.
For instance, a very simple one that was done in the past is the Headless Horseman,
Right.
based on the Washington Irving short story, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow.
Yes.
The Headless Horseman is this demon that rides a horse down lonely roads. You could basically create some stats for that guy and just basically have the characters on a road or outside a small little sleepy hamlet that's being terrorized by this creature. And then, have a one-night combat with this thing as it, you hear its hooves in the distance. One of the clever things, so one of the products that they came out with in second edition, that's probably worth checking out on PDF, maybe on DM's Guild if you're so inclined, is a product it was one of the first Ravenloft accessories to come out, called Dark Lords.
Oh,
and all it is an anthology of several Dark Lords and then describes their domains in a very kind of broad strokes way, but often with like a map of the domain and a map of the villain's or Dark Lord's lair. So with the idea that a DM can just take one of these things, go off, flesh it out, and run it for their game. There's a little bit of work that you have to do to actually execute on them, but all the pieces are there.
Right. You can take them as inspiration and plunk them into anything.
Exactly. And the Headless Horseman one is one of the particularly simple ones because it's mainly you can drop them into any domain, anywhere, at any time. You just need basically woods, a lonely road, and maybe a bridge.
And the idea of a horse.
Yes. And there's actually a cool thing that always stood in my mind when I ran it, which was this version of the Headless Horseman can animate the severed heads of his previous victims, and they basically just fly and tumble down the road ahead of him. Ooh. Sort of like a grotesque harbinger of the doom yet to come.
You're like, what are all these rolling?
Yes.
Oh no, they're heads.
No, yeah, they're heads, not goods.
One of them's a puppet head, just for funs.
Yeah.
That's very cool. What about like? I'm no aficionado of horror, so I won't. But I mean, even the more broad strokes of things like the human centipede kind of idea, or something like that, or
any X-Files episode.
Right, or anything like that. Like you can, an Abominable Snowman, or any type of things like that. You can wrap up in one of these domains, and or anything that horrifies you is something that you'd be inspired as a dungeon master to use this way.
Exactly. You can, and it usually starts with, the characters arrive in some small village or settlement that's been beset or tyrannized by a great evil that presides over the land. So in the case of the Abominable Snowman, you might be, in a sleepy mountain hamlet buried under the snow, and all the people gathered around the warm fires at night to tell the tale of the howls of this sinister creature. And you could play it out almost like a Hound of the Baskervilles style adventure if you want to.
Trying to find out what,
or you can say, there are Sherpas who for large sums of money will lead you to where they think the creature is, and you can confront it, and maybe there's something about the creature. Maybe to escape its domain you need its blood or its still beating heart or God knows what. But and then it becomes a showdown between you and the behemoth on some ice precipice.
You just mapped out the entire adventure right there. It's perfect.
Yeah.
People steal that. Use it.
Right. And maybe all you need map-wise is a little map of the village and like a map of the ice cave where the characters, have their fateful encounter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool. And I think, another thing that comes to mind is like the Saw movies, how they have like a Jigsaw type, he's clownish, but it doesn't necessarily have to be like someone who's got like a game that you've got to solve to get out and like an escape room type thing.
Yes. There was a later product, I think it was called in second edition Ravenloft, called The Book of Crypts, I think. And one of the stories, it was like an anthology of adventures, basically. Yeah. And I think one of the stories was you're trapped in a house with with music playing and a bard, sort of the ghost of a bard, and you have to basically riddle your way out of the house by finding clues and things.
Ooh, neat. There's lots of different ways that you can incorporate things that are horrific into these one-shots, and now is the perfect time to do it.
Yes. You can also dig out, there's been a whole passel of old Ravenloft adventures out there that you can basically pick up and adapt. Curiously, one of my favorites back in the day was a dungeon adventure in issue 61 called Jigsaw.
Oh.
It has nothing to do with the later coming movies.
Yeah.
It's a Frankenstein story, basically, with a flesh golem.
That's created, and does it have sentience or not?
Right, it does, and it's looking for love in all the wrong places. It's very gothic and well told story.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Important to note if you're going to do.
I wrote one myself, back in the day. An old
did?
Ravenloft adventure. One of the first adventures I ever got published as a freelancer was in issue 38 of Dungeon. It was called Horror's Harvest, and it was a riff on Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Ooh.
With pod people.
Huh.
Yeah. A comet crashes near a village, and suddenly people are being replaced by
copies of themselves. Ooh, creepy.
Yeah.
It's easy to do in D&D with doppelgangers and things like that.
And actually, I think the adventure would be pretty easy to adapt.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Have you never adapted it for 5th edition yet?
No.
All right. Well, some enterprising dungeon master out there.
Yep.
Find it. Issue 38. Once again, I love how you can just pull out like issue numbers. Drop it back.
When it comes to Dungeon Magazine, I have, it's got a warm, fuzzy place in my heart.
That's cool.
Yeah.
But I mean, one thing, just having all these horrific images, I just, always want to make sure that your players are on board with that type of thing.
Yes. I think the terror is is very real in these adventures, and so it does behoove you to make sure that your players are game for a gothic horror experience. Now, if you want something that's already been done for 5th edition, there are a couple of recommendations I can make. One of my favorite ways, if the players are on board, is to basically wake up with nothing in Castle Ravenloft and just have fun.
Yeah, get out if you can.
Right, get out if you can. You don't have any weapons, you don't have any spell books, you probably don't have any clothes, but that's okay. Right. Just tear down that curtain, wrap it around yourself, and just run screaming like a maniac for the nearest door.
And there's some organ music happening.
That's always fun. I think people have a good time with that. But there's also a starter adventure in Curse of Strahd called Death House, which has been very popular. It's sort of your classic ghosts and haunted house adventure in Barovia.
Yeah.
You can play it in one night, and for starting characters, and I think it has all the right creeps and crawls. Feels like a Scooby-Doo adventure.
Right, exactly. But yeah, again, make sure your players are on board, especially if it's going to be different or a one shot from your normal campaign.
Yeah.
Always a good idea to have.
The good thing is with Domains of Dread, it doesn't take anything really to get you into the story. You just say, you wake up, the mists have borne you to a strange domain, and deal with it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's how a lot of great. I mean, we mentioned a whole bunch of X-Files or Twilight Zone or other anthology series like that, where there's very little need to buy in other than like, here's your circumstances. What
Correct.
do you do?
Yes. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it can be a fun exercise for a dungeon master as well.
Yes. Absolutely.
All right. Excellent. I think some people are going to be creeped out this Halloween. Do you want to give any clues for what's going to happen with Dice Camera Action?
So this week we've got 2 Dice Camera Action adventures. We've got our regular game tomorrow on Tuesday, which is actually going to be very Halloween-y themed.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah. Leading into our big game at TwitchCon in full costume and regalia on stage, the Glitch stage, where the Waffle Crew will be joined by 4 sizzling guest stars, including Vivid Vivka, whose character who we're going to see on Tuesday's game.
Okay.
She'll be returning for Sunday's game at TwitchCon, along with Felicia Day and Malik Forte and WWE superstar Xavier Woods. Yes. Circle R. They will be playing characters at a costume party in Waterdeep, and the theme is everyone's invited, and that everyone includes some very bad people from the Waffle Crew's past.
Good preview. I love that. I can't wait to see what your costume will look like.
I can't wait either. I'm very excited.
It's going to be very fun.
Yeah.
So check that out. That's going to be October 28th, 2:30 p.m. Pacific time. It'll be on the main Twitch channel, but we'll be hosting it on twitch.tv/DND.
Our D&D channel.
You know, where the things happen.
Twitch.tv/DND.
That's it. One of us saying it is probably better than 2 of us getting into it at the same time. If people want to get spoilers from you on what's going to happen, how can they get in touch with you?
I am on Twitter at Chris Perkins DND.
Excellent. And of course, you can pester him with all kinds of domains of dread advice.
Yes.
You got a plenty. I know you do.
Yes. As the Dark Lord of the Domain of Dread of West Seattle, I have some advice.
Excellent. Well, thank you. We'll be back with some more lore you should know next week.